booties for black girl nerds.
Thank you for your time, David. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
When I thought about your character, I thought about, even though Marshall is of Jewish faith, I thought about the verse, faith without action is dead, and how his faith influences what he does. To what extent do you think faith influences him to be a man of service versus a man of wealth and comfort?
Yeah, I think that is one of the central questions for Marshall, right? His faith and his action were so tied together when he was young. And then like a lot of us as we get older, like manage to get to a point of relative complacency, not really paying attention to the mechanics that are controlling the synagogue he's living in and how connected that is to the sort of corrupt political system and how connected that is to the fact that the earth is warming, right? And so it takes this little girl coming in and asking him these questions about faith. How could God let this happen, right? That force him to re-engage with his faith in an activist way. And so, yeah, I think that is a big part of his question, his central question. And I think it's telling that by the time we get to the end of it, his synagogue is no longer like that building wasn't it. The building that was the source of all the stress, right? He's still being a man of faith in a center for the homeless at this point. Yeah.
I love that actress that performs those scenes, a young lady. I'm sorry, I can't
Nesca
remember
is
her name.
unreal. Yeah,
She,
Nesca. She's
I
incredible.
love the way that the two of you, well, she's more sparring you, and you're being very gentle. Your character's being very gentle in response, but she's really like a North Star, like why?
Yeah.
Is it what do you think? Is it easier for him to interact with someone like that who is asking him directly, like, what is all this for?
I think she immediately challenges him in all the ways he's been hoping to be challenged. And so, yeah, I think you're right that he's gentle with her because he mostly doesn't have the answer for her, you know? Um, yeah, and so I think Nesca is like such an incredible actress. And so, to find somebody that young because you're absolutely right, she's driving all those scenes. And so also to find the actress who could pull that off at that age is really unbelievable. Yeah, I think she's so wonderful.
This is a heavy topic, no matter where you lie in the wealth spectrum. We all influence the globe to some sort of extent. When you think about Marshall and where he lies in his belief system within that, where do you think he lies? More of a good intentioned, uh, confused. How does his presence help or hurt these global warming efforts or combating that?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think he's positioned like most of us. We're like generally like a well-meaning person, um, who like whose life is such that you don't think about global warming all the time, even though it's right in front of you. This is like what we all do, right? Certainly, one of the reasons I relate to him is like I don't be examining the climate science as much, and I'm outraged by it. I know that it exists, and like I'm not like a denier. Like I know that it exists, and I still don't spend like a significant amount of my life like actively thinking about how the choices I'm making affect the climate. And so I think Marshall's a lot like me in that sense. But so hopefully the cumulative effect of this whole series when people get to watch it is that like it just makes us think a little bit more. If it can do that much, if it can make us make active choices instead of passive ones in terms of how we relate to the climate, I think that does a huge amount as like one part of a much bigger conversation that we need to be having.
I loved your character. I think Marshall is all of us and where we lie in this spectrum. So that made him very enjoyable and relatable.
I
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
for your time. I appreciate it. They are giving me the Sandman hug.
All right. Great to see you. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, everyone, for your time this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Scott, beginning with you, as the world we've seen the effects of climate change start to happen already, whether you choose to believe it or not. And the way the show has examined these topics has been really compelling to show the interweaving. When you, in the course of creation of the show, is there a specific instance that you could point to that made you want to elevate this topic to the level that we see in extrapolation?
I guess as a storyteller, this is all I've got, you know? I have the power to make things up. And, you know, right now you could go and Google, what can I do about climate change? And you'll get a lot of answers. What we wanted to do, and my reason for, you know, focusing on this is I wanted to use my skills, whatever I have as a storyteller, to try and identify the second and third order effects of climate change, the things that aren't in the weather report that affect people. Because if you're a Marshall Islander, climate change is affecting you because your island is sinking. If you're someone who works on a farm in the Midwest, drought is changing your capacity to make a living. If you're in India, farms are failing and farmers are actually committing suicide. And so this affects people in the global north and south, and people who have money and people who don't have money very differently. And what we all wanted to do was to find the stories that intersect people where they live.
Mhm. Dorothy, over for you, to you. The tone of the show is, it almost has sort of a menacing tone, as it should. And that made me lean into it even more, even though these are things that I live in California and it's been raining here way more than needs to lately. So what could you speak a little bit about, using that type of tone in the show? Some people choose to go a little lighter, more educational, but this is like warning, warning, it's coming no matter what time you live in.
Yeah, I think we thought about the show really as a thriller, because there, on the one hand, there is our human capacity for invention, creativity, solidarity, collective action, change, imagination. And on the other hand, there's our capacity to ignore things, be self-centered, not want to, face things, certain people's capacity to be greedy. And we really saw the show as a thriller between the best and the worst of humanity, that those two impulses are fighting, and there's a clock, like any good thriller. There's a ticking second hand going, are we going to be able to do this? What are we going to be able to do in the time that we have? So we wanted a tone that felt fast-paced, that felt exciting, that made you lean in, that made you wonder, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? Because that's what we're all asking. That is what the future will be, is a series of choices made by people that determines what happens next. So we wanted it to feel like you couldn't stop watching.
Mhm. Michael, over to you. Depending on where you live in the abundance scale, I guess, in society, there's a clear bad guy and a clear good guy, but no one thinks about their own simple actions like single-use plastic, or how even at the micro level you affect climate change. Is there a discernment of a bad and a good guy? I mean, I've seen the series, but is there a discernment of a bad and a good guy in this over the course of the season?
Yeah, the show, I think this subject can make both people who are passionate about this subject cynical and people who are not cynical. The show is not cynical, meaning it is moral. There are good players and bad players in it. But I think what's really awesome and exciting about the show is more than giving you simple villains and simple heroes, it lets you understand how a lot of people get to make decisions around this subject, both in their own personal lives and that affect the larger planet, and let you understand how they got there. And that's not to justify some of the bad decisions made. It's more to give you some sense of understanding and sympathy, and hopefully some command over how maybe we can make better decisions, right? And so yes, there's morality in it, and but we're less interested in pointing out who are the easy villains and more pointing out how we can approach this, how we can be more sympathetic to our fellow humans, so that hopefully, if we're gonna move forward on this subject, we're gonna do it all together, or we're gonna not do it all together, right? And we're inviting, we're hoping for the former.
Well, if you wanted to screen this in Los Angeles, it's a good case study right now going on here. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So
You.
Take care. Thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it.
Hi,
Thank you.
Tiandra. I love Black Girl Nerds. That's such a great title.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Come by anytime. Beginning with you, Indira, as I thought about your character and the billionaire people who are in the world, the Gateses, the Bezos, and the people like that, who are often centered in discussions on climate change and how the earth is evolving, did you look to any of them into giving your character a certain cadence, a certain way that you really wanted to embody that? And what were your own thoughts of climate change before entering into the project?
Oh gosh, there's lots of questions. I'm going to forget them all. Yeah, no, I didn't really look to anyone. I mulled over, if you are a billionaire, you have a responsibility because you're in a position of great power to do something. And I think there's quite a few billionaires out there who are sort of doing things for their own ends. How much change are they really doing? I would like to ask them directly. Because I feel like there's a lot of people who don't have that much power, as it were, who are doing a hell of a lot and standing up and shouting about it. And I feel like it's really important, which is why it's so wonderful and such a privilege to be part of Extrapolations. Because as actors, we're not activists necessarily. We are storytellers, and to have the privilege of telling a story that really matters is it feels like there's a point. Suddenly you have a purpose.
Mm-hmm. Tahar, over to you. Within that, being storytellers, does it change do you feel a certain responsibility given the subject material? It's not a frivolous topic, it's a very real thing. I live in California. Our weather's been crazy lately, very related to climate change. Does it change the level of responsibility you bring to your embodiment?
Always. I'm not picking my project, because of a certain political thing or whatever. It's always the part and the story, the material, the people I want to work with. But it quite often happens to be related to something more important and bigger than just movies. And in this case, it was something that I've never had the opportunity to talk about. So I felt, concerned, privileged, and blessed to be part of the Extrapolations. So I can, just give a little bit of myself to help an important, extremely important matter, and maybe give, even to one audience member, a little bit more of eco-awareness. Yeah.
What's really unique about the show is the different time periods that it jumps in and how they're all, they all relate to each other. There's all types of intersectionality between the characters, between what's happening. Indira, back over to you. When we first meet Gita, we see this press conference, there's something that's being revealed. Is it as simple as this is the good person who wants to do these things to change the world? Like, what are the different layers of who she is? Because with a topic like this, it's not so good and bad. There's no really good and bad. It's all shades.
Absolutely. What motivates someone? Often it is something that's happened to them in their childhood. It's having the relationship with her parents and with India, and wanting to make change in her mother country. I think that is definitely something that motivates her. Yeah. What else? Not sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, the material was, I was really leaned in because I thought about my own responsibility as just a regular lay person, whether it's single-use plastic or just
Yeah.
any of those things that could make the world better. Tahar, to end with you, one tip on making our presence on this globe better for the next generation, if you have one.
When we see the news and what's happening, we feel like we don't have power. But we have an important power, is the people you're surrounded with. Just you can show them what we can do at our own scale. I don't know, saving water, electricity, recycling, using your bike instead of a motorcycle, whatever. Those little moves, if every single person on earth do that, I mean, it would be heaven.
Amen.
Can I just add one little
Of
thing to that,
course.
which is I feel like we need to consume less and to ask ourselves, do we need it or do we want it?
Mhm.
Because there's a big old sales pitch going on most of the time. We can recycle, we can reuse, etc. Do we really need all this stuff?
I agree. I agree. Thank you. They are wrapping me. Thank you so much for your time. A really important series. I appreciate you speaking to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Better shake your booties for black girl nerves. Better shake your booties for black girl nerves.